The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of St. Jude's Trauma Center, blurring the neon lights of the city below into smears of violent red and bruised purple. Inside, the air smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of dried blood. Stella pushed the med cart down the East Wing corridor, the wheels squeaking in a rhythmic, irritating cycle. Her hands trembled. They always did. The left one was worse than the right, a constant, low-frequency tremor that made the vials of morphine rattle softly against the stainless steel tray. "Careful there, Tremors. Don't drop the good stuff." Dr. Vance leaned against the nurse's station, his pristine white coat unbuttoned to reveal a designer tie. He was the type of surgeon who cared more about his Yelp reviews than his sutures. He smirked, looking around for an audience. Two younger residents giggled, avoiding Stella's gaze. Stella didn't look up. She focused on her breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The tremor was neurological, nerve damage from a botched interrogation in a basement in Kyiv 6 years ago. But to Vance, it was just fear, incompetence. "I'm fine, doctor," Stella said, her voice soft, barely audible over the HVAC system. "You're a liability," Vance snapped, his smile vanishing. "I saw you struggling with the IV on the PureWick in room 402. If you can't keep your hands still, you belong in the cafeteria serving slop, not on my floor." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "One more slip-up, Stella, and I'm reporting you to the board. I don't care how short-staffed we are." Stella gripped the handle of the cart. The metal felt cold. She could end him in 3 moves: a strike to the throat, a shatter to the knee, a twist of the cervical vertebrae. The thought was intrusive, automatic, and terrifyingly calm. She pushed it down. That life was over. "Understood," she whispered. Suddenly, the intercom crackled. It wasn't the usual calm voice of dispatch. It was a scream, cut short, followed by a robotic, pre-recorded tone. "Code black. Oxygen storage. Level 3. Evacuate immediately." The alarms blared, a harsh, rhythmic honking that sent adrenaline spiking through the hallway. Panic erupted instantly. The residents froze. Vance looked around, his face draining of color. "Oxygen storage?" Vance stammered. That's right behind us." Stella's eyes shifted. The tremor in her left hand vanished instantly. Her pupils dilated, taking in every detail: the distance to the exit, the structural density of the walls, and the panicked stampede of orderlies down the hall. "Run!" Vance yelled, his bravery evaporating as he shoved past a patient on crutches. Stella didn't run. She turned the cart, abandoned it, and sprinted toward the danger. The double doors to the oxygen storage room had been blown off their hinges, not by an explosion, but by a hydraulic ram. Inside, the air was freezing. The pressurized tanks hissed like a nest of vipers. Stella slid into the room, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. In the center of the room, strapped to the main distribution manifold, was a device. It wasn't a messy, homemade pipe bomb. It was a black box, sleek, military-grade, with a digital display glowing crimson. 0059. 0058. Dr. Vance had followed her, likely to yell her to evacuate, but now he stood paralyzed in the doorway. "Oh, God! Oh, my God! We're dead! The whole wing! The tanks! It'll be a fireball!" "Shut up," Stella said. Her voice was no longer soft. It was steel. She dropped to her knees in front of the device. She recognized the wiring immediately. Semtex charge, mercury tilt switch, anti-tamper loops. This was Russian Spetsnaz design, modified for urban sabotage. "Stella, get away from it!" Vance shrieked, clutching the doorframe. "I'm leaving." "If you open that door, the change in air pressure triggers the secondary sensor. We vaporize in 0.2 seconds. Vance froze, his tears streaming down his face. You know that?" 00400039. Stella ignored him. She didn't have tools, no wire cutters, no diffusal kit. She scanned the room. She needed to bypass the mercury switch without cutting the loop. She needed to freeze the circuit. Her eyes landed on a canister on the far shelf. Liquid nitrogen, used for dermatology consults, stored here against protocol. Vance, the canister. Pass it, now. I can't move! Stella lunged. She covered the 10 feet in a blur, grabbed the heavy canister, and slid back to the bomb. 0015, 0014. She ripped the safety valve off the nitrogen tank. She didn't have a hose. She had to pour it. It was reckless. It was insane. This is going to get cold, she muttered. She tilted the canister. The liquid nitrogen smoked, pouring directly on the mercury switch and the battery casing. The metal groaned. The digital timer flickered. 0005, 0004. The cold burned her fingers, turning her skin red, then white. She didn't flinch. She held the pour steady, watching the frost creep over the red wires, solidifying the liquid mercury inside the switch. 0002, 0001. The timer froze at 0001. The hum of the bomb died. The only sound was Vance's hyperventilating breath and the hiss of evaporating nitrogen. Stella set the canister down. Her hand was steady as a rock. Silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the distant wail of sirens approaching from the city. The threat was neutralized, encased in a layer of jagged frost. Stella stood up, wiping her freezing hands on her scrubs. The adrenaline was fading, and with its departure, the familiar tremor began to creep back into her fingers. She clasped them behind her back. Dr. Vance peeled himself off the doorframe. His fear was rapidly transmuting into anger, a defense mechanism for his bruised ego. He looked at the bomb, then at Stella, his eyes narrowing. "You," Vance breathed, his voice shaky, "you almost killed us." Stella stared at him, bewildered. "I just saved the entire East Wing, Doctor." "You tampered with it," Vance shouted, finding his rhythm now. "You're crazy. You poured nitrogen on a bomb? Who does that? You could have triggered it." "It was a mercury switch," Stella said calmly, moving toward the door. "Freezing it was the only way without cutters." The doors at the end of the corridor burst open. Hospital security, led by Chief Miller, rushed in, guns drawn but pointed at the floor. "Hands up! Step away from the tanks," Miller bellowed. Vance immediately pointed a shaking finger at Stella. "It's her! She was in here! She was messing with the device! I tried to stop her!" Stella stopped. She looked at Vance. The audacity was breathtaking. "She's unstable, Miller," Vance continued, sweating profusely. "She's the one everyone calls tremors. She snapped. I caught her trying to detonate it or something." Miller looked at Stella. He knew her as the quiet nurse who brought him coffee on the night shift, but fear makes people irrational. "Stella, put your hands where I can see them. Now." Stella raised her hands slowly. She didn't argue, she didn't scream. She was analyzing Miller's stance. Safety off, finger on the trigger. He's panicked. "Check the security cameras," Stella said softly. "Cameras are down. Power surge 5 minutes ago. Get on your knees. Now." Stella knelt. As she lowered herself, she noticed something near the base of the oxygen tank assembly, a small black residue mark in the shape of a skull. It wasn't just a bomb. It was a message. And Vance blaming her wasn't just cowardice. It was convenient. Too convenient. As Miller cuffed her, Stella's eyes locked onto the bomb again. The timer was stuck at 0001, but the display flickered. It wasn't a countdown to an explosion anymore. It was a countdown to a transmission. They dragged her to the security holding room in the basement. It was a concrete box with a single metal table and a two-way mirror. Miller didn't put her in a cell. He cuffed her right hand to the table bolt. "Stay put," Miller grunted, looking more confused than angry. "Police are 5 minutes out. Bomb squad is 10. Don't make this worse, Stella. He slammed the door. The lock clicked. Stella waited exactly 3 seconds, then she went to work. She wasn't worried about the police. She was worried about the transmission. The bomb upstairs was a beacon. It signaled that the defenses were down, that the hospital was in chaos. The bomb wasn't the attack. The bomb was the doorbell. She looked at her cuffed wrist. Standard Smith & Wesson handcuffs. Double lock mechanism. She leaned forward, biting the small bobby pin she kept in her messy bun. She slid it out with her teeth. Her hands were shaking again, violently now. The stress of the cage. Focus. The mission. She closed her eyes. She visualized the internal tumblers of the cuff. She inserted the pin. A twist, a scrape, a click. The cuff sprang open. Stella rubbed her wrist. She stood up and moved to the door. Locked from the outside. She didn't have time to pick it. She looked at the ceiling. Drop tiles. She dragged the table to the corner, climbed up, and pushed the tile aside. She pulled herself into the crawl space just as the heavy steel door to the holding room blasted inward. Stella froze in the darkness of the ceiling, looking down through the gap. 2 men entered. They weren't police. They wore black tactical gear, gas masks, and carried suppressed MP5 submachine guns, no insignias. "Clear," one whispered. His voice was modulated. "She's gone," the other said. "The scapegoat is loose." "Doesn't matter. Proceed to Phase 2. Locate the target in ICU. Bed 4. The senator." Stella's blood ran cold. Senator Kale, the whistleblower who had just been admitted for chest pains after a car accident earlier that evening. They weren't here for the hospital. They were here to finish the job, and the only thing standing between a hit squad and a defenseless patient was a nurse with shaking hands. Stella dropped from the ceiling vent into the linen closet on the 4th floor. The hospital was in lockdown mode. The corridors were dim, illuminated only by the red emergency lights. She needed a weapon. She ripped open a sterile pack, a scalpel. Too short for a firefight, but good for close quarters. She grabbed a roll of heavy-duty medical tape and a pressurized canister of anesthesia spray. She moved into the hallway. The silence was heavy, unnatural. At the far end, near the ICU doors, she saw them. The 2 tactical operatives she had seen in the basement were setting up a breach charge on the ICU double doors. They moved with professional precision. Mercenaries, ex-military. Stella didn't have the element of surprise for long. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount. She rolled the canister of anesthesia spray down the hallway. The metal can clattered loudly against the floor tiles. The operatives spun around, weapons raised. "Contact rear," one shouted. Stella kicked the fire extinguisher. It slid across the waxed floor, spinning violently. As it neared the operatives, she threw the scalpel. It was a 1-in-a-million throw. Guided by muscle memory she thought she had buried. The blade struck the valve of the fire extinguisher. Whoosh! The extinguisher exploded in a cloud of white chemical dust, blinding the corridor. Stella sprinted. She dove into the white cloud, low to the ground. The operatives fired blindly, bullets sparking against the walls and shattering the glass of the nurses' station. She slid into the legs of the first operative. He fell, grunting. Stella didn't hesitate. She drove her elbow into his groin, then grabbed his falling MP5. She didn't shoot. She used the stock of the gun to smash his visor. He went limp. The second operative emerged from the white fog, swinging a combat knife. Stella parried with the stolen rifle, blocking the blade. The impact jarred her arms, but her hands, miraculously, were steady. He kicked her in the ribs. Stella flew backward, crashing into a crash cart. Defibrillator paddles dangled near her face. The operative lunged. Stella grabbed the paddles. "Clear," she hissed. She slammed the charged paddles into his tactical vest. The shock bypassed the Kevlar, arcing through his neck. He convulsed and dropped like a stone. Stella stood up, breathing hard. Her ribs screamed in pain. She looked at the ICU doors. They were still sealed. The senator was safe. For now. But as she checked the first operative's radio, she heard a voice that made her blood freeze. "Team Alpha, report. This is Vance. Is the job done?" The name echoed in Stella's mind, reshaping the entire night. The arrogant, incompetent doctor wasn't just a coward, he was the insider. The bomb in the oxygen room wasn't just a distraction, it was his alibi. He could play the victim while his team took out the senator. Stella grabbed the operative's radio and earpiece. She didn't speak, she just listened. "Alpha, report." Vance's voice crackled again, impatient. "I have security occupied in the West Wing. You have 3 minutes before the police breach the perimeter." Stella looked at the unconscious men. She stripped the vest off the smaller one and strapped it on. It was heavy, smelling of sweat and gun oil. She took the MP5, checked the mag, full. She wasn't Nurse Stella anymore. The mask was off. She moved to the security hub of the ICU floor. She needed to secure the floor before the police arrived, if the police arriving were even real police. She keyed into the computer system. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She wasn't hacking, she was using the override codes she had memorized from the chief's blotter months ago. She pulled up the live feed. The lobby was swarming with SWAT. That was good. But on the roof, a helicopter was landing. It wasn't a medevac. It was black, unmarked. "Extraction team," Stella whispered. Vance was planning to leave with them. He was going to sell the senator out, blow the hospital to cover the evidence, and fly off into the sunset. She saw Vance on the monitor. He was in the server room erasing the digital logs. He was deleting the footage of him letting the mercenaries in the side door. Stella keyed the microphone on the stolen radio. "Dr. Vance," she said, her voice drop an octave, dead calm. There was a pause on the line, then a shaky reply. "Who is this, Alpha?" "No, this is the liability." She saw Vance on the screen spin around, looking at the cameras. "I know what you did, Vance. I know about the senator, and I know you're in the server room." "You're dead," he hissed. "You hear me? I have a team sweeping the floor." "I am the sweep," she replied. She smashed the radio against the desk. She grabbed a handful of syringes, epinephrine, a stimulant. If she was going to fight an extraction team, she needed to be faster than humanly possible. She injected the epi into her thigh. The rush hit her instantly. Her vision sharpened. The pain in her ribs dulled to a throb. She chambered around in the MP5 and stepped out into the rain-slicked stairwell. The stairwell was a vertical tunnel of concrete and shadows. Stella moved silently, descending toward the server room on the second floor. She heard boots above her. The cleaners from the helicopter were coming down. She heard boots below her, Vance's remaining ground team coming up. Pincer movement. They were flushing her out. She was trapped on the third-floor landing. She looked at the door. Morgue pathology. She kicked the door open and slipped inside. The morgue was freezing, lit by the ghastly blue glow of UV sterilization lights. Stainless steel tables lined the room. Some were occupied. Stella moved to the back wall. She needed a trap. The door handle jiggled. Then silence. They were professional. They wouldn't just barge in. They would breach. Flashbang, she thought. She grabbed a jar of formaldehyde from the shelf and a portable cauterizing tool. She smashed the jar on the floor near the entrance, the pungent chemical pooling rapidly. The door flew open. A canister rolled in. Flashbang. Stella shut her eyes and covered her ears. Bang! The light seared through her eyelids. The sound was a physical punch. But she was ready. As the 3 operatives rushed in, stepping into the pool of formaldehyde, Stella flicked the cauterizing tool on and tossed it into the puddle. Foom! The chemical fumes ignited instantly. A wall of blue fire erupted at the door. The operatives screamed, retreating into the hallway, padding at their burning legs. Stella didn't wait. She sprinted through the back exit of the morgue leading into the laundry chutes. She encountered a giant of a man blocking the narrow service corridor. He wore no mask. He had a scar running down his face. He smiled. "I know that style," he grunted. He dropped his rifle and pulled out a jagged tactical knife. Kiev, 2018. The Wraith. Stella stopped. She recognized him. Dragos, the interrogator who had given her the nerve damage, the reason her hands shook. Dragos, Stella whispered. I thought I broke you, he sneered, stepping forward. You tried, Stella said. She dropped the gun. She raised her fists. Her hands were shaking. Dragos lunged. Dragos was strong, relying on brute force. He slashed the air, the knife missing Stella's throat by millimeters. Stella didn't block. She flowed. She was smaller, faster. She dodged under his arm, using the slippery floor to slide past him. She grabbed a laundry cart and slammed it into his knees. He roared but didn't fall. He backhanded her. Stella flew into the wall, her head cracking against the concrete. Stars exploded in her vision. The tremor in her hands became a convulsion. Dragos loomed over her. Look at you. Broken toy. He raised the knife. Stella looked at his boot. She remembered the anatomy of the foot, the cuneiform bones. As he stomped down, she rolled, grabbed a discarded scalpel from her pocket, and drove it through the leather of his boot, pinning his foot to the floor. Dragos howled. Stella stood up. She grabbed the IV pole standing next to the laundry bin. With a primal scream, she swung it like a baseball bat. The heavy metal base connected with Dragos's jaw. The sound was sickening. He spun and collapsed, unconscious before he hit the ground. Stella dropped the pole. She stepped over him. She didn't look back. She reached the server room. She kicked the door in. Dr. Vance was there, holding a hard drive. He looked up, terrified. He pulled a small pistol from his coat. "Stay back!" he screamed. Before Stella could move, the glass wall behind Vance shattered. "Freeze! FBI!" Red laser dots danced across the room. Vance dropped the gun, raising his hands. "Thank God, officer! This woman is crazy! She's a terrorist! She killed my staff!" A dozen tactical officers stormed in. They pointed their rifles at Stella. "Drop the weapon! Down on the ground!" Stella stood tall. She was covered in soot, blood, and chemical burns. She didn't drop the MP5. She held it at low ready. "I said down," the lieutenant yelled. "Stand down, Lieutenant," a gravelly voice boomed from the hallway. A man in a trench coat walked in. He looked tired. General Holloway. The police looked confused. "Sir, she's armed." Holloway walked past the police, past the shivering Vance. He stopped in front of Stella. He looked at her shaking hands, then he looked at her eyes. He snapped a sharp salute. "Agent 01, status." Stella didn't salute back. She just exhaled. "Target secure, General. Mole neutralized." She nodded at Vance. Vance's jaw dropped. "Agent what?" The hospital lobby was a chaotic sea of flashing lights. Paramedics were treating the wounded mercenaries, under heavy guard. The senator was being moved to a secure military facility. Dr. Vance was being shoved into the back of a black SUV, handcuffed. He was screaming about his lawyers, about entrapment, but no one was listening. Stella sat on the back bumper of an ambulance, a thermal blanket wrapped around her shoulders. A medic was bandaging her hands. "You need stitches here," the medic said gently, "and you've got a concussion." "I'll live," Stella said. Her voice was back to being soft. The adrenaline was gone. The shaking had returned, violent and exhausting. General Holloway approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her. "You went dark for 6 years, Stella," he said quietly. "We thought you were dead or turned." "I wanted peace," Stella said, staring into the steam of the coffee. "I wanted to save lives, not take them." "You did both tonight," Holloway said. "We found the files Vance was trying to delete. He was brokering hits for the syndicate, using the hospital as a cover. You didn't just save the senator, you cleaned house." Stella didn't answer. She watched the rain wash the blood off the pavement. "Come back in," Holloway said. "We need you. The syndicate is growing. You're the only one who knows how they think." Stella looked at her shaking hands. She looked at the hospital, the place where she was mocked, where she was invisible. "I'm just a nurse, General," she said. You and I both know that's a lie. He handed her a secure phone. Keep it, just in case. Holloway walked away. Stella watched him go. She intended to throw the phone into the storm drain. She wanted to go back to changing IVs and being ignored. But then, the phone in her hand buzzed. It wasn't Holloway calling. Stella looked at the screen. Unknown number. She hesitated, then slid her thumb to answer. She didn't speak. "Hello, little bird," a voice whispered. It was synthesized, distorted, but the cadence was familiar. Stella stiffened. "You performed well tonight. Vance was a loose end. We needed him gone. Thank you for cleaning up our mess." Stella's grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" "You think you stopped the bomb?" The voice chuckled. "The bomb in the oxygen room wasn't meant to kill anyone. It was an aptitude test, and you passed." Stella looked up at the hospital. The lights were flickering back on. "You're active again, Stella, whether you like it or not. If you try to run, if you try to be a nurse again, we won't send mercenaries next time. We'll send the patient next to you, the orderly in the hallway, the child in pediatrics." "I will find you," her voice said, devoid of fear. "I'm counting on it. Welcome back to the game." The line went dead. Stella stared at the phone. Her hands were shaking. She looked at them. She clenched them into fists until the knuckles turned white. The shaking stopped. She stood up, letting the thermal blanket fall to the wet pavement. She didn't look like a nurse anymore. She looked like a weapon. She turned and walked into the rain, not toward the hospital, but toward the dark city skyline. Her shift was over. The war had just begun.